So the issue is now what have we got? Well, the Straits of Hormuz, the sides are like this. They go straight up for 1,000 feet. So do you land down in the southern tip of Iran, march across desert and climb mountains in order to reach the inside? In other words, take the strait, so to say, from the shore. Can you get anywhere? Are you going to mass your force down there by the ocean? In which case you're going to be destroyed on the beachhead. Are you going to mass your force up on the mountain? In which case you're going to be destroyed on top of the mountain. I mean, there is no understanding that this kind of warfare, which the Soviets, to their credit, foresaw in the 1970s, has now come to fruition. It works. Can you jam satellites? Can you destroy satellites? Because if you can, then you have a shot, because then they're firing blind. But unless you can stop that and interfere with those signals, this ISR strike complex, which is grown up, is unbeatable.
Yeah, this started off with network-centric warfare, and that's how it was all described. And I often wonder if one of the things in Afghanistan, people thought that actually it was the network-centric warfare had arrived, but I think now it has arrived. And I think what's made a difference, as well as gluing all the different sensors together and fusing the information so you've got a really clear battlefield picture, it's having the accuracy, but also if you actually then glue that to hypersonic weapons, of which there's no defense, it makes for an impossible situation to defend. And I was thinking about, how many people would you want to put ashore to actually have a chance? And we're talking about 2 MEWs. That's essentially 2 reinforced battalions, as far as I can see. Then if you've got the Ready Brigade from 82nd Airborne, you're talking tiny numbers of troops, really. And as soon as they're ashore, then again, even if you can't see them from satellites, then no doubt you can see them from drones. So, they're going to be strategic bombardment. It's just, to me, it sounds like a bloodbath to me.
How do you get water to them?
Yeah.
How do you replenish ammunition? Yeah. How do you sustain any of it?
Yeah.
Now, perhaps President Trump is prepared to pin the Navy cross on someone who is willing to take his ship into the straits and run the gauntlet. But there is no gauntlet to run. You're just going to die.
Yeah.
You're going to be shot.
Yeah, no, I strongly agree with you. And the idea of Kharg Island as well, because then you've got to take your amphibious force through the strait to get to Kharg Island, let alone actually.
Well, I think people are talking about flying to Kuwait or perhaps Bahrain or the UAE and think that they can gather there in secret, then climb into the V-22s and UH-60s and fly across the Gulf. Again, you're subject to so much surveillance, persistent surveillance, that I don't see how you do it.
My contacts in the Ministry of Defence think that they are going to try and take this island. Half jokingly, my colleagues below both know who my contacts are, and some of them are fairly senior. Have said that Trump wants to call it rather than the Straits of Hormuz. It'll be called Trump Straits when the Americans take charge of it. It's an ego out of control. People do stupid things, and we are doing crazy things.
There are a lot of people in the ground force who equate athleticism with military capability. That's been true for you, and it's been true for us.
Yeah.
Athleticism isn't worth a damn in this setting. It doesn't make any damn difference at all. So then the question is, how long can you bomb? How long do you launch rockets and things? And keep in mind that within the first sort of 96 hours, we had expended billions of dollars worth of our most elaborate and exotic munitions. I don't know what we have left, but I would think that to cover all the bases inside Iran from which missiles and drones could be launched. But that's a tough mission. I don't think, I'm sure the Air Force and Navy will try, but how much of that can you defeat to ensure the success or the survival of your troops? I think it's going to be tough.
I stayed at the Ministry of Defence, the UK Ministry of Defence's Telford, which is their biggest weapons store in the UK, and this is a couple of years ago. And the words that came from the officers there, not my words, we are depleted. And this is several years ago. Yeah. So it's an insane situation that we believe that we would be trying to go ahead with this with
Well,
these.
I went to Israel in 2020. I was a guest of the IDF, and the IDF chief of staff at the time was a very, very bright person. And they had taken my book, Transformation Under Fire, they translated this book. And so I explained to them how they could build this ISR strike system. And Israel could enjoy virtually 360-degree security from any possible threats, and how you would have to sort of reconfigure your ground force to, and by that way, and also by implication, the surface Navy vessels to operate within this umbrella. In other words, it's sort of putting a dome over the country, but it really defines the battle space and how you can, with great precision, instantaneously reach out and strike any particular enemy that may be threatening you. That really wasn't what they wanted to talk about, but that's what I thought they wanted to talk about. And they ended up with a discussion about Hezbollah and some other things. And one of the things I tried to convince them of, which didn't work, was I said, I realize that you're very concerned about Iran. But truthfully, among the Muslim countries, Iran is the one that has the potential to be a strategic partner for you in the region. And all you have to do is go look at the works that have been written over many, many years. People like Sam Huntington back in Political Order and Changing Societies and subsequently Clash of Civilization kept pointing to Iran. Iran is the one that is positioned to make that leap out of the past and into the present and become a strategic partner. And there were certain reasons why we also had a long-term interest in partnership with Iran. And I said, but I understand you're concerned about that, but I want to talk to you about the state that I think is truly your existential threat. And I said, Turkey. You could have heard a pin drop in the room. And then I started talking about their force structure and how they had to plan for it and what the nature of the Turkish threat was. And I essentially told them, if you go to war with the Turks, and at some point I think this is probably going to happen, you're in a fight for your very existence in life. The Turks will fight you to the last Turk. Well, after it was over, I walked out in the hallway, and suddenly about 4 or 5 of these Israeli generals, I was talking to a room full of about 40 of them, came up to me and said, "Oh, Douglas, that was wonderful. Thank you for saying that. We all know that's true, but no one will say it." So I was kind of hopeful that, they'd be smart and avoid this war with Iran. Boy, was I wrong. I couldn't have been more wrong, because our friend Netanyahu and his inner circle is hell-bent to utterly destroy it, and they figured they've worked now for decades to gain complete control of the United States government and its armed forces. They have it. They better use it.
It seems to me right now that Trump is already trying to polish failure as success. I don't know if you saw that completely ridiculous moment with Pete Hegseth, saying that there's never before been such a magnificent military victory as has happened by the Americans over in Iran. It's quite bizarre. But I mean, Trump appears to be desperate to get out of this. Is that your sense?
Yeah, I think he is privately. And I think what you're in right now is a 5-day pause while he and his inner circle and advisors, most of whom are people like Lutnick and Witkoff and Kushner and so forth, along with this chairman of the Joint Chiefs, they'll all gather under the cone of silence and try to talk about how do we finesse this? Because I think they've realized they can't conquer Iran. It reminds me of a statement made by Karl Radek. He was the Bolshevik who was sent to negotiate with the Germans at Brest-Litovsk. And he wrote his report back to Lenin. And he said, the good news is whatever happens here, the Germans realize that we cannot be conquered. And he was right. The Germans, the First World War Germans were not idiots. And that's how you got the agreement in the Brest-Litovsk line, which was essentially the westernmost or the easternmost limit of civilization at the time. Beyond that was, Tartary, Turks, Tartars, and Russians, and so forth. And I think the Iranians know that they cannot be conquered. We're the ones that figured it out privately, don't want to admit it publicly, and are now trying to step down from all the stupid statements we've made. But everything's mortgaged to vanity with this president, and frankly, with everybody in Washington. So you can't just back off. You can't come to terms with reality and say, we're going to take a different approach.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to double down in a big way. Whatever we've got left in the inventory, we'll launch. We'll try to lambaste everything that's left on the ground in Iran. We'll try to do the same thing to the Straits. I think it'll be a disaster. I don't think it'll work.
The Iranians have absolutely no reason to settle now diplomatically. I mean, to paraphrase Trump's words to Zelensky, Trump has no hand of cards to play, and of course the Iranians do. So they can play long ball on any diplomatic process. Quite frankly, it seems to me. And why would they want a pause only for the Americans to restock, their sort of weapon supplies and so on?
No, I think that's true. And we continue to ignore the fact that they have powerful allies. The Russians and the Chinese are not going to abandon them. I've been saying this for years whenever this comes up. Why is it in the interest of Russia to abandon Iran to us? Why would the Chinese do that? They, in fact, see this as the red line, the Rubicon in some ways. We have to stop these Americans here because if we don't, they'll move on to other places and create more havoc and chaos. Taiwan's a good example. Moldova is another example. In other words, if we don't stop them in Iran and prevent Iran from being destroyed, and the Chinese have already told them, hell, we'll help you rebuild your country, and we have the capital for it. Russia, as you know, is just making money on a scale that's unbelievable thanks to this whole thing. We should go down the diplomatic route. What I have suggested, and I was on this morning again talking to somebody on a show in India, and I said, I think Prime Minister Modi is ideally positioned as one person who could step forward and tell President Trump, look, let me mediate. And we can host talks here in New Delhi, whatever you'd like, because he has good relations with Israel. He has good relations with Iran. He has good relations with the Russians. And he has reasonably good relations with us. India is not a co-belligerent per se, although they're being harmed badly by what's happening in the Gulf. I mean, their agricultural sector, in terms of fertilizer, food, feed, all they've got real problems. But I don't know that he'll pick that opportunity up and do anything, but I think he could make a difference. And that might enable Trump to step back and down from where he is. But nobody else out there really can do that for Donald Trump. That's why I mentioned Modi. The other thing is he's in Asia. I mean, he's in proximity to it. He's on the periphery, but this is not just a financial event or economic event for India. This is a real war that, if it's not stopped, could have profoundly negative consequences for billions of people. He represents that. Now, we, don't think in those terms. If you're already living at the center of the universe, which is what everybody in Washington thinks, why listen to anybody else? But I think Trump is pretty desperate right now. And if he was approached privately in confidence, there's a chance something could happen. But the other problem, and I think you pointed this out, is that how do you get the man to shut up? I mean, every time he opens his mouth, it's another incendiary device goes off, and he screws himself along with everybody else.
I'm going to ask if that's why he's wheeled out J.D. Vance, because the Iranians won't talk to Witkoff, Kushner, or Trump himself. So they've wheeled out Vance to see if he can make a difference.
Both inside the United States as well as outside the country, everybody views Kushner and Witkoff as Israeli agents.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
No one sees them as genuinely representing American interests.
Of course.
His base, one of the things that the base was concerned about when they voted in the last election was, are you going to keep Kushner out of the White House? They didn't want the man anywhere near the White House or Donald Trump under any circumstances. So that would be wise of Trump to take the hint, but I don't see any evidence that he is. The other thing is he doesn't like J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance was kind of pushed on him. Peter Thiel walked in there, offered a lot of money, and he took J.D. on. He said, okay, yeah, I guess I can get along with J.D., and okay, I'll do that. But he doesn't like him. He seems, for some strange reason, to favor Rubio at this point. His whole focus is to become viceroy of Cuba, I guess, in Latin America.
Yeah, of course.
So, I think I had dinner with him once, and I did talk to him a few times. This is not someone with a great depth of experience in anything.
He did
He's a
strike me.
public affairs guy in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, he did strike me though as one of the few in the before he became vice president who was actually talking much more realistic about the Russia-Ukraine war. One of and that gave me hope at the time. I thought with him and Gabbard that there would be two voices of reason in the White House, and I still don't know whether that's true. But Ian Puddock, I know you wanted to shift focus onto Ukraine, and I'd be fascinated as well.
Yeah, I just not War and Peace, and I know we don't have you for 7 hours, but could you give a real brief overview? And I'll tell you why I'm asking this question of why the proxy war started, and the reason. And I know you've said this a million times, but my audience is just Joe Public. People not engaged in necessarily all the things that are going on in the bubble or the sphere that we're in. And most people believe the press, they believe the news. Putin woke up one morning, he's evil, he's bad, and he just took out Ukraine. Do you know why? Because he can. And that's the problem. And if we don't stand up for freedom and democracy and stop him, and most people genuinely believe that. And if you say anything else, it's a Kremlin talking point, a Russian stooge, and all this kind of nonsense.
I don't know anything about Putin's personal life. I liked his girlfriend, the gymnast. That's another story. But my point is, I don't care about those things. I'm not interested in those things. What's he done for or to Russia? And if you look at what he's done since he took over, I was there in November 2001 for a week when I was on active duty. We met with the Russian General Staff Academy and with the General Staff. It was a fascinating opportunity. I'm sorry that I've never been able to go back, and now it's impossible. I mean, if you go there, you're a traitor, you're tinged. So when we look at the situation today, I think we can say that in retrospect, Putin did what he thought he had to protect his country, and I don't think he understood the half of it. I think he thought that this force being built up in Ukraine was dangerous and had its sights on Crimea to retake it and would eventually become a problem, but I don't think he understood the full extent. I don't think he appreciated that he was dealing with lots of people in the West who were determined to really destroy Russia, to rape it, to divide it up, to take its resources, gain control of it. There's somebody named Bill Browder who wrote a book about red. I mean, he's a reprehensible human being, despicable in every sense of the word, and he talks about how, he had to leave on pain of death. Well, if you look at what he was involved in, and had I been Putin, I'd have shot him too. The things these people were involved with over there are just awful, exploiting the population, taking everything. So I don't know how you convince people in the West of this, because there are still too many people listening to the mainstream. And you've got a problem with it. Let me tell you something. I've lived for years in Germany, and I've had these conversations with my German friends, and all the Germanic countries are the same. The Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and of course, Germanized Finland, and to a lesser extent, Austria. There are more free thinkers down there, but Germany, they all go, well, they say on the news, this is what happened. And I said, have you learned nothing from the last several hundred years of history that you've got to find these things out for yourself? You can't believe news. What? In Sweden, well, the state has said it is a good thing for you to wear seatbelts. And I sat there and said, well, I don't like frigging seatbelts. So I don't want to wear it. Oh, but you must wear it. The state says you got. I go back to my Highland ancestry here, screw the state. I hate the state. And they look at me and say, well, you're an army officer. I said, well, that's different. I signed on voluntarily to fight, but, I don't like the goddamn state. So don't tell me the state wants to do this. This is a big problem in the Germanic countries. Get them out of the rut. How do you get them out? I don't know. And I know it's a problem in England, and I know it's a problem in Scotland. The last time I was in Scotland, I was shocked. People say the dumbest goddamn things. This young man says, it is a human right in Scotland for everybody to have free medical care. And he said, what do you think? I said, well, I think you can do whatever you want if you can pay for it. Well, I disagree. It's a human right. Okay. Good luck. I mean, these crazy things are all over the place. And so how do you penetrate? I don't know.
I think I'd best describe it as we're victims in the West of cult thinking, and it's across our elites. They appear to be cult thinking. But what do you think will be the consequences in the United States, both within the Beltway and amongst the United States population, of developments in Iran? What will be the consequences for the Russia-Ukraine war?
Well, people have lost touch with what's happening in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Kind of written it off. They never really knew where it was anyway. And they didn't care as long as they, quote unquote, didn't have to pay for it or didn't have to fight there.
Mm.
That will eventually come back to hurt us, but that'll be part of the larger package that we're going to see develop with Iran as well. And that package is as follows. People are going to discover this mountain of lies. It's just what I said it is, a mountain of lies, number one. Number two, they're going to be hit hard financially and economically. I mean, the prices are rising. My mother-in-law is 90 years old, very sharp woman. She's a typical New Englander, hard, tough nut, live forever. And she goes to various places, come back and said, my God, these prices are up. And she starts talking about butter and milk and cheese and you name it, everything. This is going to hit home, and it's going to hit home soon. And right now, I listen to the CEO of Chevron, and I'm told that the CEO of United Airlines has said something similar. They both said we're anticipating oil at the cost of $170 a barrel.
Yep.
So we're already baking this into pricing and everything else. This is going to upset a lot of people in the United States because a lot of people at the bottom are struggling. And then they look at the top. They look up to the Trump White House, and we're now seeing what we call Hunter Biden levels of corruption. I mean, we knew Clinton was corrupt. Everybody that followed him was corrupt. The Hunter Biden exercise was beyond belief. But now, what are we discovering? It's just as bad with Trump, maybe even worse. So we find out that Kushner's hedge fund or whatever he's got is now $6.2 billion, that the Saudis gave him $2 billion to invest for them. I mean, Trump has made everything for sale. When he was running, he had a dinner and they had this audience filled with people, and you want to be an ambassador, it will cost you $2 million. I mean, this stuff is out of control. And you saw the big bet that was made on the market just a few minutes before he announced what he was saying. Are you telling me nobody in the White House was part of this? Just look at who is in the White House. He's surrounded by billionaires and wannabe billionaires. So what you're seeing is the crisis of legitimacy for all the institutions of governance. That's coming. And I think by the summer, it'll be very rough in this country.
I listened to three economists regularly. The first is Michael Hudson, who talks about the difference between industrial capitalism and financial capitalism. The second is Jeff Snyder, who talks about the euro dollar mechanism, which is really interesting. But the one I've been listening to most recently is Luke Graham. I was listening.
He's very good.
He's extremely good. I was listening to him in the gym this afternoon, and he said, as regards this, it's all about the Straits of Hormuz. If it's not open in the next 3 weeks, we're in for a major, major problem, worse than anything that we've seen in our lifetime. I mean, I do economic analysis, and I completely agree with him, but I was quite shocked that he was saying as soon as that, because I don't see the Straits being opened within 3 weeks. I just can't see how.
Well, there's another gentleman named Grundlager who says much the same thing, and you've got Alistair MacLeod in London, who is a very astute analyst. He spent his life in the gold markets, and he's been the canary in the coal mine now for at least the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I mean, these people are all telling us more or less the same thing. They view it from different angles, but the same story comes out. And so I think this crisis of legitimacy is inevitable. And it's going to reach the point where people are saying, I'm not paying my taxes. I think that will happen. What's the point?
We've got here in Britain, we've got the City of London, which is seen as a great economic benefit. I actually think it's a massive cuckoo in the nest, because when this starts to go down and the financial sector goes down, and Luke was talking about a sovereign debt crisis across the West, which seems most highly likely.
Well, the high level of leveraging is one of the reasons why no country in the West can prosecute a war for any period of time, and why when people talk about we're 27 times bigger than Russia, collective kind of GDP of NATO, that ignores the fact that they have no available liquidity to prosecute a war for an extended period of time, because all of their economies are so kind of highly leveraged, and actually Russia has very, very low debt and very, very high levels of income. And, it doesn't matter that it's fit for
And lots of munitions.
and lots of munitions.
Yeah.
So that kind of, that leveraging point, that kind of the lack of liquidity is actually, and the US has the worst debt of anybody. It just dooms you to failure in an extended attritional kind of fight.
Well, I was struck by the fact that the Russians are actually selling gold.
Oh, interesting.
I didn't know that.
They've been stockpiling it for ages. That's why they've got 400 billion just sitting in the bank.
Well, I'm told that they've also discovered in the Ural Mountains, in some caves there, that were created or turned into vaults of some kind by Stalin back in 1941, when it looked like the Germans were going to reach Moscow. And a great deal of gold was stored there. And that has only recently come to light. Now, how much is in there, who knows? But, Stalin is capable of anything. So the other thing is, my oldest son, he travels everywhere. He goes everywhere I can't. So I depend a lot on him to tell me what the truth is. He was in Russia for a month, a little over a month, and then he went from there to Istanbul. Very interesting insights. But one of the things he said to me the other day, when we were actually, this was yesterday, when we were talking about the Trump levels of Hunter Biden corruption, he pointed out, he said, you remember Necker in 1781, who was the finance minister in France. And he actually put together a pretty good budget, because he was trying to deal with all the excesses and the problems that had been created in the years before that. Ultimately, he was sabotaged, not so much by the king, but by the so-called aristocracy, the elites, because they were busy monetizing everything to their benefit. And he was actually going to put a stop to it with his budget. But he said, Dad, even though that happened in 1781, it took another 8 years for inflation to finally drive the price of bread up to the point where people in Paris couldn't afford to buy bread, and that brought on the revolution. So I think we're in that Necker moment, but it's not going to take 8 years. It's going to take months, and everybody's going to be shocked. How could this happen? I don't know if we'll go through what the Soviet Union did, where you wake up and suddenly nothing runs, nothing works, there are no police, nothing anywhere. I don't know if it'll be that bad, but it's certainly not going to be good, because people, Americans, like to push the I believe button. I believe the president could fix this,
It was 5 years in Germany from memory, as they went into hyperinflation.
Well, Alistair McLeod talks about a person in Berlin at the height of all of this, with a bag that could fit into your pocket with gold, several ounces of it, and buying, 6,000 or 7,000 square foot mansion in Berlin with that bag of gold.
Yeah.
Well, would you please tell me what the conditions are right now on the ground in Britain? I mean, I read David Betts, and I was struck by his comment that the people sitting in Parliament don't know what's happening 2 or 3 miles away from where they're sitting. Don't really understand what's happening.
Well, the best explanation, Doug, is that our navy is its smallest size since 1650, and a wooden ship with sails could probably get to Cyprus quicker than HMS Dragon. And our army is the smallest since it's been since 1822. And that tells you all. And yet we talk big about taking on the Russian bear. and yet we have no bulls.
No.
That's an example of how in the West generally, I think we're particularly bad at it, how poorly we spend money on defense. In terms of value for money, it really is poor. And I'm sure it's to do with financial capitalism and the way that the hedge funds, etc., invested in it. I'm guessing, I don't know what you think, Ian Puddett, but I'm guessing the situation's different in terms of feeling within London and outside London. Certainly outside London, I don't think people have really woken up yet. In fact, I'm sure they haven't woken up to the implications of what's going on in Iran. I mean, I've just done a briefing for certain local government people just about what this could look like. But
yeah, I mean,
any sense of
regular working people. What are they concerned about? Families, jobs, job security, paying bills, cost of living. Are they all engaged in what's really going on? No, they pick up from the BBC and Fox and Sky and all the rest of it what's going on, and they don't really know what's going on. It's propaganda. I mean, I was. She'll be watching. We should be watching this tomorrow. So I was with a journalist from. Well, I won't say it was, but a big American news broadcaster this morning that you will all know. And we were talking about Putin this morning, and I said we were talking about Trump this morning, and I said, he's heavily influenced, isn't he? I mean, he's not really calling all the shots. And she said, well, who are you saying is calling all the shots? I said, well, who do you think? And she said, well, Putin, obviously. He's completely controlled by Putin. And she's from a big global American news media company. And when I suggested who is more likely to be influenced by, she was shocked. She was surprised. She said, no. Putin, everybody knows it's Putin. She wasn't lying to me. She genuinely believed it. What hope did Joe public that aren't really engaged in this have? That's the problem.
No hope.
No hope, yeah. No hope.
The Financial Times yesterday had a report saying that even all of our migrant crises, they've been caused by Putin too. And it just brings to mind that brilliant Russia Today Christmas advertisement, which was taking the mickey out of us in the West, saying it's all because of Putin. It's all done. I don't know if you've seen it. It's hilarious. You should look it up. But everything is Putin's.
It's Putin. It is. It's all Putin. My brother-in-law, who's Finnish, he was saying, you've got these illegal migrants coming over in boats every day. You know who's behind all of that, don't you? Obviously, and the answer was Putin. And I said, well, do you really believe that? And he said, no, we had a documentary. We had a TV documentary explaining how the Russians were orchestrating all of that. I didn't bother to search that nonsense out. I've got better things to do with my time. But he believed it. He absolutely unquestioningly believed that Putin was behind the illegal people that are coming in on boats every day from France.
So George Soros and Anne Applebaum and a host of others like them are all innocent in the corner. And they're trying to save us from ourselves by pushing the Putin threat. These people have done enormous damage, and I'm just depressed that what I'm hearing from you is that people where you are haven't figured any of it out.
No.
See, at least here people are starting to figure it out. And of course, what they say, you're an anti-Semite.
Yeah, of course.
That's losing its bite, because not every Jew out there supports this craziness.
No.
And we know that. I mean, I've got friends that are big supporters and backers who are absolutely opposed to everything that we're doing in the Middle East, and they happen to be Jewish. So I know that's not true, but there is an element of globalism and the people in it, whether it's this Klaus, whatever his name is, I've forgotten. Yeah.
Well,
all of these people are really, mightily responsible for the catastrophe that we confront. How you connect that to Putin is beyond belief. But I stopped listening to the London School of Economics presentations because it was dominated by the Applebaums.
Yeah.
And people like this crazy person, Sikorsky, that she married in Poland.
Oh, gosh.
She wants Poland to commit suicide yet again. Go to war with Russia and Germany.
Yeah.
I heard Max Blumenthal recently. I think he was talking to the judge, and he was actually saying that one of the things that is happening, and we are starting to see, I don't know about you in Proud, I certainly see it in some of the stuff, for example, I'm doing with Danny Davis. The commentary is, I would say, 90% of it's positive. There's a few bots in there, but 90% of it. And so often I hear something like, "Oh, thank God we're hearing voices of sanity."
Yeah.
So I think in the alternative, we are making a difference, but it's going to take time, unfortunately.
Yeah. I don't know what it's like where you are, but my generation is pretty hopeless. I'm 73, and I have friends, peers out there who were in the military with me and everything. And we need to bomb Iran into the Stone Age. We just need to crush these people and be done with it. And whatever's left, the Israelis can have it, and they can do whatever they like. And I look at these people. What's the basis? It's, Iran is evil. Iran's behind everything. Sort of like Putin. They don't know what they're talking about. It doesn't matter. There's no way to reason with them. What's his name? Who was it? Thomas Paine said, time makes more converts than reason. I just hope we don't run out of time before it's too late, because my generation is just hopeless.
Yeah, no, it's the same here. Lots of friends that are Iranian. They don't like the regime, which is fair enough. And I always just say, I'm absolutely anti the war. And they go, oh, so you're pro the regime? No, I'm not pro the regime. But the people in that country, if they're not happy with their government, it's their responsibility to do whatever they need to change the government. It's not our responsibility to kill everybody that we don't like. It's insane. So it's just insane. One of the dads, said that they killed over 150 little children, little girls in a school. And he said, well, it's a small price to pay and stop worrying about it. We've got this covered. The Shah's son is going to come back and he loves Iran. He loves the people. And, it's, I was raised
I had dinner with him a few years ago. He's a very nice man, but he couldn't lead a troop of Boy Scouts. So
I'm sure.
And he's entirely in the pocket of the Israel lobby, 100%.
Yeah, of course.
But the expatriates are always the ones you need to worry about because many of them just misinform you to death. You got to be very careful to believe what they say because they're out for a reason in most cases. But we just don't need to go to war with these people. That's the key thing.
No.
People understand that.
First, do no harm. I'm guessing that time we ought to stop taking much more of your time, Doug.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure. It's always nice to talk to you. By the way, I received an invitation to speak at the Cambridge Union.
Oh, did you?
Way.
Yeah.
But I understand they don't pay anything and they don't defray the cost of travel or anything else.
Oh, okay.
Well,
So
Doug,
if they don't, I said to my son Cameron, I said, what do you think? He said, they don't pay anything, forget it.
Yeah. Why would you?
Well, I've got Airbnbs here that you can stay in no charge anyway.
Yeah.
I've just been invited.
They want me to talk about NATO and why it's defunct and unneeded and so forth.
Yeah. I've just been invited to debate at the Oxford Union. But and I tell you what the proposition is, what the motion is. I have to debate against it. It is, this House believes that we should go to war with Russia once and for all, and finally get Ukraine back. That is the motion that I have to oppose at the Oxford Union. I kid you not.
Have any of you ever read the book The Forgotten Soldier by Guy Serre?
No.
Everyone who wants to go fight in eastern Ukraine or Russia or White Russia needs to read that book. Guy Serre just died about 5 or 6 years ago. And it should be required reading at West Point. We were encouraged to read it when I was there, but it's fallen out of favor. But Guy Serre, Sajer, first name Guy, Guy. His father was French, but his mother was a German. And he was born in Alsace-Lorraine. And when the Germans came in, he was 17. And so they evaluated him and said, we have some interesting news for you. You're German. You now have the privilege of serving in the Wehrmacht. He didn't speak a word of German. His mother hadn't really taught it to him. And so he takes you on this journey, which puts him on the battlefield in late 42 and takes you all the way to the end of the war.
Yes.
And it's a fascinating story. It's a nightmare. I mean, anybody who thinks they want to go over there and fight needs to read this thing because you will be permanently cured of any further interest in that idea. But the book ends very interestingly. He's standing in French uniform as a soldier in the French army because when he was released, they said, well, you owe it to France to come back and serve. He said, fine. He said, I was very good. He said, I was the best soldier the French ever had because I'd been trained by the Germans. And, he's very straightforward about that. And he said, I was standing on the Champs-Élysées near the Arc de Triomphe, and they were reading off the names of the honored dead. And he says, they start reading these names in French. He said, but I knew who the names really were and who the honored dead were. And he starts repeating the names of all the Germans and others because he had Czechs and Russians with him in the Wehrmacht. But he starts reading off these names. These were the heroes, not these other men. Of course, you can imagine that got him into a lot of trouble. But I urge everybody to read it first for the horror, but then read it from the standpoint of this man who went all the way through it, and that was his conclusion. And I listened to British veterans of the Second World War and listen to them talk and how disappointed they are in their country and how awful it was. sound a lot like Guy Serre. And I know my maternal grandfather who fought in the First World War came back absolutely furious. We should never have been in that war. These people were never our enemies and so forth. My father was in the Second World War. He said he was glad he was fighting in the Pacific because he would never go to Europe to fight. And he didn't like it. It was terrible. He ended the war in Okinawa. But if people sat and listened to people that really did something, really saw action, really went through hell, they might sober up. But we've lived for too long in this push button environment. Fire a missile and everybody surrenders. We walk in and occupy, waste trillions of dollars, and then we come home. That's not war. And we have a false picture of the past. I just finished something else. I don't know if you've read it. Alan Brooks' unexpurgated private papers about the Second World War.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Not the one that came out while he was alive. I'm talking about the one that's unexpurgated. And I was furious. I was really angry because I grew up in a family that revered the British Empire. I'll be honest with you. We thought it was a good thing. We didn't think it should last forever. That's different. But it was on the whole, and it's upon the whole that these things should be judged. It was a good thing. And when I saw the things that he dealt with Churchill and Churchill's insanity, dumb ideas, dumb decisions, that man destroyed Britain. He destroyed the British Empire, destroyed British national power. Everybody continues to run around and celebrate that man. FDR was our disaster. But, Churchill, my God, the first thing you have in all national strategy is preserve your national power. Yeah. That was William Pitt. That was Palmerston. That was Disraeli. Everybody understood that. Churchill never did.
And Keir
Don't do
Starmer
anything that destroys your national power. What?
Keir Starmer most certainly doesn't.
No. Keir who?
Starmer's Bolshevik. Good Lord.
Right. On that note, we should probably draw it to a close. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you so much.
We really appreciate the time you've taken to educate us and our audience.
Well, I don't know if I educated you or you just were kind enough to listen to me rant and
No, it's brilliant. Thank you
I'm
very
probably
much.
too relaxed with you guys. That's the problem.
No,
Other people I'm more guarded
this
with.
version. We like this version. Thanks so much, as always, for joining us today.